The Ratchet & Clank franchise is known for having a large cast of colorful characters, and given that it's hard to only choose 10, I've decided to expand the list to count down my 15 favorite characters in the series. I still had to make difficult cuts, but this should be a comprehensive list of my favorite R&C characters. You'll notice that my preferences steer more towards certain games than others, and I'll explain why that is. In making this list, I've mainly ranked characters based on their peak content, and not in terms of consistency throughout the whole series. If the latter was the case, then some of my favorites might not even be on here. Inconsistency can still factor in my ranking, however, for example if I've gotten tired of certain characters despite how good they've been. With that said, here are my 15 favorite R&C characters.
Number 15.
Brought to you by the letter R. Sorry, I couldn't resist.
That line alone puts Captain Romulus Slag on my list. Okay, on a more serious note, or maybe not, I consider Captain Slag to be the funniest new R&C character past the PS2 era, alongside Rusty Pete, who just barely didn't make this list. Rusty Pete is the more outspoken of the two, and maybe I just slightly prefer the more laid-back nature of Slag. He's still a big goof though. I very much enjoy his pirate gimmick, playing that role so well with his voice and mannerisms. That's part of why it's so funny when he says something like,
Me wee cannonballs!
or sings,
I'm a little teapot, short and stout. Here is me handle, here is me spout.
He's a great poet. His best appearance is either in Tools of Destruction or Quest for Booty, but I'm glad he co-hosts Pirate Radio in A Crack in Time, delivering bangers, including original shanties.
I'm fixing to plunder, tear your ship asunder, and rob you of all of your loot. So if you like breathing, you best be leaving, 'cause anyone left, I'll shout!
His best dynamic is undoubtedly with Rusty Pete, but it's also fun to watch him bicker with Angstrom Darkwater while sharing the same body.
Darkwater, ye got a lot of nerve possessing me. This be my body now.
Watch your tongue, you made-humoured body snatcher, or I'll carve out your gizzard and fry it for me supper.
If I was a pirate, I would happily serve under Captain Slag. Next up is Dreadzone's male squishy commentator, Dallas. This guy has a great voice, making him a pleasant commentator to listen to, even though his lines often repeat. But I love it every time he shouts,
Run, Ratchet, run! Run, Ratchet, run! Run, Ratchet, run!
He's so funny, occasionally going off script and criticizing it.
Bingo, bango, the shields are up. Too bad the station's core took a direct hit. Too bad the radiation's everywhere. Too bad I said bingo, bango. Who writes this junk?
He often harasses his co-host Juanita, but always gets his comeuppance.
Dallas, what's happening? Dallas, what are you doing?
Nothing, just keep your eyes closed. Go!
I like how after shitting on Ratchet so much throughout the game, they instantly switch when Gleeman Vox decides to blow up the Battle Dome, pretending like they've always been on Ratchet's side. They actually show up in the movie/PS4 game, but they're rather lifeless in comparison, so their best portrayal is definitely in Deadlocked. I know it's Dallas who I'm supposed to talk about, but it's kind of difficult not to include Juanita in the discussion, given that they're always together. Still, I don't like Juanita quite as much as Dallas, even though she's fun in her own right. Perhaps my favorite thing about her is how Dallas pronounces her name.
I never did like the look of him, Juanita.
Thank you, Juanita!
The first prime number of this list adds my most deviant pick, but I can't deny that I love the mathematician. He's only in a total of 2 cutscenes, on a single planet, but he multiplies Dabo's comedic value. He lives up to his name, incorporating math into all of his sentences, and the way he talks like a pro wrestler makes it so funny. He says things like,
Watch your mouth, Zero, before the mathematician subtracts your head from your shoulders!
It might seem too simple a reason to place him this high, but I'm a simple man who enjoys simple things. Besides, one of the best aspects of the first two games are the side characters you meet for a brief time, and I'd argue that the mathematician is among the best of the bunch. He may be odd, but he's one of a kind. Dreadzone's commentators are great, but its host is even better. I'm of course referring to our favorite galactic shark, Gleeman Vox. This guy is a great villain, encapsulating many of the early games' themes, being a corporate shill who will go to great lengths to put on a show and sell to his audience. At the memorial for Ace Hardlight, Vox blatantly advertises an action figure of him and tries to replace him with Ratchet, offering all the deals you could think of. I love Michael Bell's performance in that scene. It literally puts him out of breath.
Commercials, 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 commercials. and
He sabotages civilizations for his game show, like disrupting Stygia's shields that protects it from meteors, and has absolutely no remorse doing so. He might be an evil scumbag, but his sheer charisma makes him so entertaining to watch, and I have to admire that he's even willing to sacrifice his own life for viewership. He is many things, but a coward he is not. Vox might have only been in one game, one of the more obscure ones at that, but his portrayal certainly left an impression. KT7461, aka Kit, is my favorite new character in the series, so if you were expecting Rivet to make it on here, then that's too bad. I like Rivet and all, but I don't find her as compelling, nor as charming as Kit, who's cute as a button and has a really well written arc. While she may come off as harsh in some scenes, I was pleasantly surprised by that, and I could very much sympathize with her struggles. Kit is also reminiscent of the Iron Giant, being designed as a merciless warbot, yet is able to break free from that purpose. Despite how aggressive she can be, she's very kind at her core, and some of my favorite aspects of Rift Apart's writing is her wholesome conversations of self-acceptance with Ratchet.
So when you asked to become partners, I did not want to risk things either. But I am glad I did.
Thanks, kid. That means a lot. But I'm just not sure it's...
It is okay. Now I can be the one who believes in you.
At the moment, Ratchet and Kit are a better duo than Rivet and Kit, which is partly due to the conclusion to Kit's arc being rushed, but she got to where she needed to be, and hopefully a later game can flesh out their relationship more. Number 10 sees the placement of my favorite green dude bro in gaming, Skid McMarks.
In the flesh, little dude.
This dude has such a good name, literally being a play on skid marks. Like his name, he's really funny, speaking like a surfer guy who's high on weed, and acting like a goof.
Hey, lucky for you dudes, I brought this. Stand back, bro. I'm like a trained professional and stuff. Don't try this at home. Oh man, it's busted. Oh wait, never mind.
That's part of what makes him so endearing, also that he tries his best despite being scared. He's actually the most helpful squad mate in Up Your Arsenal, going out of his way to help Ratchet and Clank, even when he's not needed. It's clear character development from the first game, where he lied about having a sprained ankle to avoid dealing with sand sharks. Even when he turns into a squishy-hating robot, he still acts like himself.
Like, destroy all squishies and stuff?
He's fortunately turned back into a squishy, but doesn't reappear in the canon timeline until Rift Apart, and I was surprised to see him again. He doesn't have much screen time in it, but his alternative dimension version has a fair bit. He calls himself Phantom, which is a good nod to Skid calling himself Shadow Dude in Up Your Arsenal. While Phantom isn't on Shadow Dude's level, I still like him, more than I expected to. The worst portrayal of Skid is undoubtedly in the PS4 game, where he's more cringeworthy than endearing.
Help! Someone! Call my agent! Call my publicist! Actually, don't call either of those people. Call someone who cares about me!
Too bad we don't, puke-colored Skid. I definitely call PS2 Skid though. The Mystic fortunately appears in 2 separate levels instead of just one like many other side characters do, but he unfortunately only appears in 1 game, and has very limited screen time. That screen time is used well, however, making the Mystic my favorite minor character in the series. This guy is hilarious, acting all high and mighty, spouting absolute nonsense, trying to gaslight Ratchet and Clank.
Hello? We've got more moonstones.
No, you have not.
What?
Existence is a lie. Sensations are illusions. Possessions are merely visions.
What makes this funnier is that both the Mystic and Ratchet share the same voice actor, James Arnold Taylor, so he's basically bickering between himself in the recording studio. The Mystic's voice is phenomenal, by the way. The way it cracks me up.
Crystals? Like those found in the desert? Beyond. Oh.
He's obviously supposed to be a high hippie, wanting crystals, drugs, in exchange for
cold hard bolts.
Huh?
My R&C dubs might not be so crazy after all.
Let's test.
Yikes.
Oh yes, that was some excellent crystal.
Drek might be a generic, unsympathetic villain who only cares about earning
cash and lots of it.
But that's exactly what the original Ratchet and Clank needed, given its emphasis on capitalism and corporate greed. I honestly dig how much of a dick Chairman Drek is, talking down to those he considers to be lesser, generally being sarcastic, and performing evil deeds simply because he can.
Not so fast, Lieutenant. Just because we don't need any more trees doesn't mean they should have them. Destroy everything.
Executive Chairman Drek's over-the-top scumminess makes him every bit as comedic as he is menacing, and it helps that Kevin Michael Richardson is able to capture these traits brilliantly.
Your orders are simple. Destroy anything that moves. Steal the power generators from Gorda City. Then destroy anything that doesn't move. Oh, and don't forget, have fun.
I love how Supreme Executive Chairman Drek dies, crashing into the planet he built, and getting destroyed by his own deplanetizer.
It's so poetic.
I also love the detail that Ultimate Supreme Executive Chairman Drek's title gets longer and longer as the story progresses. It's as if the main villain levels up alongside the main characters. Unfortunately, movie/PS4 Alonso Drek is one of the worst characters in the whole franchise. He's so goofy and cringeworthy, completely lacking PS2 Drek's personality. That doesn't take away from how much I love him in the original game, though.
And if you don't like it, you can take your whiny, sniveling, snot-nosed populations, form a line behind me, and kiss my... We're still on? Well, turn it off, you idiot!
The Thug Leader is a more endearing villain, Steve Bloom flawlessly combining a grovel tone with childish mannerisms, topped with a lovely accent. It makes every line delivery so much fun to listen to, like,
"Greetings, morons."
What's so funny?
Nothing, I guess. Prepare to die, and I blow hot. First of all, whatever slug brain's been eating all the choochie bars in the break room, better quit stuffing his face, or else... Hey, turn those lights off! It's bad feng shui.
I love how he tries to appear menacing by sending a message in the dark, and tells Cletus he deserves a write-up for turning on the lights. He rewards his fellow thugs with free food for accomplishing big tasks, and even throws a company picnic as a bonding exercise. Other than the high likelihood of getting killed by Ratchet and Clank, I don't think it'd be so bad working at the Thugs for Less. What an amazing name that is, by the way, probably invented by the Thug Leader himself. And I also love the slogan,
"If it ain't broke, we'll break it."
It's a shame that he straight up just vanishes after Ratchet and Clank defeat him on planet Snivelac, never to be seen again. He does briefly return in Secret Agent Clank, but as far as I'm concerned, that game is not canon. Oh well, at least his time in the canon was well spent. Dr. Nefarious is undeniably the most iconic and beloved villain in the Ratchet & Clank franchise, and for good reason. He's got such a striking design and a hilarious personality, which is so over the top that it could have made him annoying, but with Armin Shimmerman's outstanding performance, it just works.
I am defeated. I have no choice but to throw myself on your mercy.
Really? I mean, that's right, Nefarious. Your reign of terror is finally...
It also helps that his obnoxiousness is often balanced by far less obnoxious characters, so that he doesn't become overbearing, particularly as Butler.
Lawrence! Oh, dear, that was your audition for Galactic Idol, wasn't it? My mistake, sir. Dreadfully sorry.
I love how the soap opera Lance and Janice activates when it becomes loud enough.
You're just a lonely man, Lance, boarding a lonely train on its way to Lonely Town.
So help me, it's true. All aboard for Lonely Town. Choo-choo, Janice. Choo-choo.
It's a brilliant gimmick that not only adds to the comedy, but to Nefarious's character as well. I love hearing him rant over the radio about how the series finale ended on a cliffhanger.
Hello, Doctor. And what was your problem with the season finale?
It was a cliffhanger! How annoying is that? Why didn't they just finish the story?
You sound a bit angry.
You can clearly tell he's passionate about it. He was passionate about Secret Agent Clank as well, perceiving Clank as an icon for his robot superiority complex, funnily enough. The way he talks down to squishies is gold. He even uses Lawrence as a translator for deaf people just so they can get the message. Although Up Your Arsenal is still my favorite Nefarious appearance, I was so happy for his return in the Future series, where he's almost as good, retaining his glorious humor and banter with Lawrence.
In the meantime, might I suggest engaging with safety, so as not to kill any more troops?
It's not even loaded, you moron! Look!
I'm unfortunately not as fond of his later appearances. I mean, he's really good, but nowhere near the level of his characterization in Up Your Arsenal and A Crack in Time, and he feels overused at this point. He hasn't even appeared in that many games, but the nature of his returns feels forced. He was literally killed off in A Crack in Time, which by the way was a fantastic send-off, but Sony forced Insomniac to bring him back for the co-op game All for One. The first R&C didn't have Nefarious, yet he's in the movie/PS4 game, which is supposed to be a retelling of that first game. Worse yet, he turns Chairman Drek into a sheep and steals his role as main villain. That's kind of Nefarious in a nutshell now, a villain who steals the spot of other potential villains. This shouldn't even be the case, since his development in All for One seemed to suggest that he doesn't want to kill Ratchet, Clank and Quark anymore. I guess that got retconned too. So, to summarize my complicated feelings on Nefarious, he used to be a top 3 character, and I still cherish his peaks, but I'm kind of sick of him at this point, which is very sad to admit. Whereas before I would grin every time I saw him, now I can't help but react with mixed feelings. It's weird to say, but I wish he died for good over a decade ago.
Because a day without Dr. Nefarious is a day without sunshine.
Not anymore, sadly. Dr. Nefarious may be the star, but I think I favor his sarcastic butler, Lawrence. Although his character is facilitated by his dynamic with Nefarious, that doesn't devalue his character, and honestly, a major reason why Nefarious is so good in the first place is due to how Lawrence compliments him. He contrasts Nefarious' over-the-top nature with far more subtlety, so subtle in fact that his roasts usually go over Nefarious' head.
The famous Captain Quark couldn't possibly be this stupid, could he?
Even drooling imbeciles can achieve success in certain fields, sir. Mad science, for example. Shall I have him annihilated, then?
Let him come to us.
I love how much he messes with Nefarious, and he knows he can get away with it too.
What's going on? Where are my arms? Whose butt is this?
Oh, my mistake, sir. Dreadfully sorry.
Lawrence!
Janice.
Oh, Lance.
Oh my, we will have to get that fixed. One of these days.
He still hasn't fixed that defect, by the way. What a legend. I find it amazing that he has a prank voicemail too.
Just kidding. You've reached my holographic voicemail. Leave your name and a brief message. Ta-ta!
For as much as he torments Nefarious, Lawrence is still quite loyal to him. Okay, he does just leave him behind near the beginning of All for One, but he does come back to get him at the very end. He also teleported Nefarious away from his death near the end of A Crack in Time. Then again, that was a retcon, so he originally only saved himself. He's quite the enigma, so it would be interesting to explore his character more. He sadly wasn't in Rift Apart, but we do know he has a wife and child now, so maybe his character won't be so reliant on Nefarious anymore. I want to see him interact with other characters.
You're nothing but a pathetic sidekick.
We should hang out sometime.
I know he's being sarcastic, but they really should. He does talk extensively to Ratchet in A Crack in Time, but that's under a Nefarious guise. That does, however, lead to some great Nefarious roasts we wouldn't get to hear otherwise.
I'm afraid not, sir. All attempts to contact your lady friend have been unsuccessful. Perhaps she thought about marrying you and decided to make a run for it.
Man, Lawrence is so good in A Crack in Time. I'm so glad he retained his personality. My favorite appearance of his is still in Up Your Arsenal though. That game's comedy is just perfection. I wish we got to see more of his Space Odyssey look. If I was stuck on an asteroid with Lawrence for say 5 or 10,000 years, I'd happily play drums for him. All the way up at number 4 is my favorite R&C character post PS2 era, Alistair Azimuth. I tend to favor the comedic R&C characters, but Azimuth is so fascinating that he deserves to be this high up. He's an older Lombax who was good friends with Ratchet's father, Caden, and thus acts like a mentor to Ratchet. I love listening to Azimuth's stories that often relate to Caden, and given that Ratchet and Clank are separated for most of A Crack in Time, it's great to have Azimuth as my main companion.
Your father and I used to come here all the time when we were children, back when this was a raritanium mine. Looks all dried up now, but believe me, this whole place used to shimmer. We'd sneak in after the Bullards left and just huff a boot through the darkness. Caden almost broke his arm right over there.
Although I find him a comforting presence throughout my playthroughs, he's really quite unhinged, using questionable means to achieve his goal, and guilt-tripping Ratchet into serving that goal. He aims to use the Great Clock to rewind time so that the Lombax species will be saved from extinction, which includes Ratchet's parents. It's thus understandable that Azimuth is so desperate in his pursuit of this goal, especially since he's largely responsible for the Lombaxes becoming extinct in the first place. What he doesn't realize is that using the Great Clock as a time machine could destroy the universe, and he doesn't listen to Ratchet or Clank's warnings before it's almost too late. He corrects his mistake in the end, sacrificing himself to prevent the universe from getting destroyed, but it's not clear whether his sacrifice was selfless or selfish. For all we know, he might have done it to be perceived as a hero, which he seemed to desperately want, after having failed everyone around him and held on to the guilt for so long. Perhaps that's why he wanted to bring the Lombaxes back in the first place. Azimuth is a morally ambiguous character to be sure, who allows for multiple interpretations, making him quite a complicated character to dissect. Even if his intentions were noble, he still intentionally killed Ratchet, and the way he tries to justify that is amazing.
Kill you now, save you in the past!
Azimuth's design is also amazing, having white fur and red stripes, not to mention a badass armor and Omni-wrench. It's reminiscent of another morally grey mentor who's quite relevant lately. Azimuth's voice might not be as iconic, but it's nonetheless amazing, especially when Joey Doria yells, "How about a barbecue?" I'd take him up on that offer. Azimuth might have only appeared in one game, but he left a huge impact, which is why he's my favorite R&C character who only appears in one game. At last, we have reached the bestest bot in the universe.
XJ0461, but the universe knows him as B54296.
Oops. I'll just call you Clank for short.
Despite being a warbot, this little guy is one of the most wholesome characters in the series, always trying to do the right thing. And say it with me, Clank is always right. Why did you not say it with me? Could it be because he is not always right? I find it adorable how naive he can be sometimes, mistaking the Quark bot for the real thing, and getting fooled by Ratchet after claiming robots are not so easily fooled. I also love it when he goes out of character, randomly dancing like Daxter.
Sorry.
And stealing the show in the hoverboard commercial.
Yo, dudes, for the freshest boards in the galaxy, check out the new XZ88 from Gadgetron. It's so hot, it's cool.
No wonder he gets all the chicks. Clank has got so much swagger to him. Just look at his performance as Secret Agent Clank. He is smooth as hell.
Bring the car around, Jeeves, and mind the ejector seat this time.
Touches like these add so much character to Clank, and what really completes it is David Kaye's fantastic voice acting, who manages to produce one of the most unique voices ever. It is this voice that allows Clank to be more than just a robot, making him easy to sympathize with. It helps that he's so cute, and has the most recognizable laugh ever. Ah, music to my ears. Do not let this adorable little tin can fool you, however, as he can be quite lethal, being able to turn into a massive killing machine. He is mostly kind and tender, however, especially to his best friend. His loyalty to Ratchet is unmatched, sticking with him through thick and thin, even when Ratchet is being unreasonable. Although Ratchet carries Clank on his back, it really is Clank who carries Ratchet, allowing him to access places Ratchet wouldn't be able to reach otherwise, and providing him with much better movement. Ratchet may be the main character, but Clank is no sidekick. Given that Clank appears in every Ratchet and Clank game, it is difficult to pinpoint his best appearance, but he is surprisingly quite consistent throughout. Unlike most other characters, he does not have such a major drop-off in quality, even in the PS4 game, where, granted, he is not great, but he is pretty decent still. He is not bad in Rift Apart either, but he is definitely a lot better in the older games. Clank's peak lasted up until A Crack in Time, which might be my favorite iteration of him. His Timekeeper plotline did come out of nowhere, but he has become so mature by that point, and decides to abandon his destiny to stay with his best friend. It is such a satisfying conclusion to a game in which Ratchet and Clank have been separated for most of it, and although it is kind of overdone at this point, needing to get Clank back is always a motivation I can get behind. Now that I've covered my favorite robot, it's only natural that I talk about my favorite furry. Ratchet definitely has worse iterations than Clank, but I also think he has stronger peaks, which is what I'm focusing on, so I prefer him ever so slightly. I generally favor Ratchet's personality, being much more enthusiastic about the action, which is perfect for such an action-heavy game series. He may be a bit screwed up in the head, taking such a big interest in heavy artillery and killing creatures with them, but hey, so are we the players. I suppose he's like a player insert character in that sense. Despite Ratchet's lust for blood, he seems like a pretty cool guy to hang around with. He is quite handy with his wrench and can make some pretty neat things, like
Stunderwear. Huge seller on Umbris.
More importantly, he uses his skills to help Clank. And the most endearing thing about Ratchet, and Clank for that matter, is how much they care for each other. There are multiple instances throughout the series where Ratchet's main motivation is getting Clank back, and he'll go through hell and back to reunite with his best friend. Of course, it wasn't always like this, as Ratchet in particular held a massive grudge towards Clank in the first game, but it makes sense that their relationship would experience growing pains near the start. I thus find it odd that Ratchet is so mistrusting of Clank in Tools of Destruction, in which they've been together for so long that Ratchet should be able to trust Clank's judgment. Especially since, say it with me, Clank is always right, for the most part. Another reason it's weird is that Insomniac regretted making Ratchet so mean towards Clank in the first game, turning him much friendlier in sequels. I honestly think that OG Ratchet is still among his best portrayals, as his brash mentality allowed for engaging drama, and he actually developed quite a bit, which he doesn't really in most R&C titles. I don't really have a problem with that though, and I am fine with his friendlier direction, along with his voice actor change. Mikey Kelly did a fantastic job as young Ratchet.
We have a little problem. I just want the O2 mask. So if you can't open up the lock, that's your problem. Now cough up the mask.
But James Arnold Taylor does an equally fantastic job as mature Ratchet.
Oh yeah, I've got mad skills. Mad
Yeah. A difficult challenge, but one that a trained commando...
Hold on.
Much like Clank, I think Ratchet's maturity level reached its peak in A Crack in Time, so that might also be my favorite version of him. At least that game has my favorite Ratchet design. Its appeal sadly hasn't been replicated to me since. Same goes for Ratchet's personality. He used to be way funnier, but also badass, and his awkward moments didn't take away from that.
Better let me do the talking.
It is an honor for you to meet me. To meet you, Miss Gears. Hi. Hi.
Rift Apart did a decent job with his character, as well as his design, but he still felt off. He might not have been a hero for a while, but he's too timid for my liking, which is hopefully something a sequel will fix. In any case, I can always go back to admire him in the early games. If you've seen my other Ratchet & Clank videos, then this number 1 pick shouldn't come as a surprise, as I've claimed Captain Copernicus L. Quark to be my favorite character multiple times. While I'm not sure whether he's my favorite character in all of fiction, I think it's safe to say he's my favorite video game character. Some may be bewildered to hear this, considering how much of a pathetic loser Quark is, but that's part of why I love him. He's such a narcissistic asshole who treats others like total shit and often gets away with it, but he's so much fun to watch. A big reason for that is his Quark-tastic voice actor, Jim Ward, who manages to make Quark endearing despite the shit he does. I mean, he draws his operation plans with crayons. How can you not love that? He's utterly hilarious, making several R&C games substantially funnier than they would have been without him.
I'll escort you here to a conveniently exposed thermal exhaust port. We will then endure rigorous calisthenics until we have lost enough body fat to squeeze through the port.
Maybe I should handle this part of the mission.
Sure, that sounds quicker.
Another big reason why Quark is my favorite is because he's among the more complex characters in the franchise. This was apparent already in the first game, being a good deconstruction of the flawless superhero trope. Quark might have been a noble hero at some point, and he definitely yearns for heroism, but his very idea of heroism is really misguided, conflating it with his narcissistic image of himself. It thus becomes more about his selfish desire to maintain status than the selfless act of saving people. He allows himself to resort to evil means if it benefits him, like when he endorses Streck's evil plan to save his failing reputation. He's ironically villainous in his pursuit of what he considers to be heroic. He became especially desperate as Ratchet & Clank appeared, exposing Quark's evil deeds, challenging his status, and stealing his spotlight in the Solana galaxy. Quark turns to an even bigger extreme when he's hit rock bottom, pulling an immensely screwed up scheme that could have led to a galaxy-wide genocide. He sells hygienators with his hilarious alias Steve McQuark to finance his comeback, and rebuilds his reputation in the Bogon galaxy, where he can have a fresh start. Furthermore, he takes over Megacorp, mass-produces a cute but deadly pet to the galaxy, and steals Angela Cross's Helixamorph so that he can broadcast himself fixing the protopets. If that wasn't enough, he frames Angela, Ratchet, and Clank for unleashing the protopets in that same broadcast. It's such an evil plan, but I can't deny how galaxy brain it is, even though Quark messes it up in the end. He hits rock bottom yet again, becoming a test subject for Megacorp, getting crotchetized, and later behaving like a monkey. The Solana galaxy funnily enough ignores Quark's past crimes when Dr. Nefarious shows up, as Quark was the only man to ever beat him, and this becomes even funnier when it's revealed that Quark turned Nefarious into a villain in the first place.
You were 3 times my size, you stupid hoe!
I was always big for my age.
You were 26!
I love the vidcomics so much, allowing me to play as my favorite character and learn of his fascinating backstory, which isn't told with complete accuracy. Him retiring for a bit after nearly being killed by Nefarious and Lawrence was true, however, and it happens again in the main plot. Quark actually does something truly heroic, sacrificing himself to retrieve important information about Nefarious's plans. But he backpedals when he realizes that he could have died, which would have meant that his perceived heroic image of himself would be lost forever. After a little pep talk from Scrunch, Ratchet, and especially Clank.
The people of this galaxy need you, Quark. They believe in you. You can give them hope. You have a chance to redeem yourself and become the hero you have always wanted to be.
Quark returns to stop Nefarious, finally becoming the hero he always wanted to be. Captain Quark's arc in the original trilogy is incredulous, and it's hard to decide whether going commando or up your arsenal is Quark's best entry. In the former, you get his understandable motivations, brilliant plan, and hilarious Fizzwidget impersonation.
I'm sorry to incapacitate you, but our entire galaxy is in a very precocious situation. I must humbly request your sustenance on a mission of dire urgitude, a mission of superfluous peril, a mission of unequivocal imperitude.
Did that make any sense?
And in the latter, you get his full display of narcissism, terrific backstory, and perfect character arc conclusion. Those two games are definitely Quark at his peak, but he's still amazing in some of the other games. In Deadlocked, he only appears at the very end, but it was the only way one of the franchise's best gags could have worked.
Ratchet, Clank, it's me, Captain Quark. There's a nasty rumor going around about heroes being kidnapped, but don't worry, it's baloney. I mean, come on, nobody came to capture me, right? Just imagine making a show about galactic heroes without Captain Quark. Ha!
He's not the best in Tools of Destruction, but he does have some absolute gold.
You're right. This is not the time for vanity. It's the time to show the universe how amazingly awesome I am. I'm sorry, Ratchet. I hope you never have to endure the pressure of saving an entire galaxy. Wish me luck.
A Crack in Time has my third favorite portrayal of Quark. He's still a buffoon who does stupid things, but he's genuinely trying to help Ratchet get Clank back, which shows a good evolution of his character development. On top of that, he's absolutely hilarious in that game.
Dr. Nefarious has no authority here, villain. In fact, I'm not even entirely convinced he's a real doctor. So return my sidekick's pal before I bring the thunder.
You win again, technology!
He's actually pretty funny in All for One as well, and making him the president of the Polaris Galaxy was pretty genius.
That depends. Does deceitful mean impressive? Heroic? Awe-inspiring? Fine, I don't care what it means. We're talking about a light-eating Zagroot here. You know what this will do for my approval rating?
Quark has unfortunately been lacking after that, and given that Jim Ward sadly had to retire from voice acting, I honestly think Quark should be retired as well. His new voice actor is decent, but it just doesn't feel like Quark.
Yes! Folks, we have a momentous day in store for you. Starting with me! And ending with a surprise gift from Clank to Ratchet!
As the saying goes, all good things must come to an end, which unfortunately means I have to stop talking about the greatest superhero who ever lived.
Captain Quark!
Those are my 15 favorite Ratchet and Clank characters. As you can see, my R&C character preferences steer towards the old PS2 games, with a few exceptions. This is because I favor the comedic characters of the series over the serious ones, which the PS2 games nailed. Sure, A Crack in Time in particular is also really funny, but that's mostly due to Captain Quark, Dr. Nefarious, and Lawrence, who were already established in the PS2 era. In terms of the more serious characters, I don't find most of them deep enough to be included, except for Alistair Azimuth and the new character Kit, that are some of the more interesting characters in the franchise. It's no wonder Quark is my favorite then, as he's not only utterly hilarious, but complex as well. I can only hope that some future R&C characters will be able to strike such a balance as well. I'm Arcadon, and hopefully, you'll see me next time!